Today we're going to take a look at creating letters and labels, but we're going to do this using the mail merge process. And we'll explain more about that in just a moment. We're going to explain what the mail merge process is and why it's important to know about. We're going to talk about creating a mail merge for a letter, so that we're going to create a letter to a bunch of different people. After we have created that, we're going to merge that to a new document and explain the reasons why. Then we're going to talk about creating a mail merge for labels so that we can mail those letters out. And then we're going to wrap up with doing an address list. Now in this particular lesson, lesson 26, it's really going to be best to open the files from our class files folder. So I'm going to double click on class files. So I now have the file opened and we are ready to begin. Let's start by talking about what a mail merge is. A mail merge is when I want to take a letter, in this case, so I have the letter typed out here, and I want to send this letter to 10 people, 30 people, 300 people. In the last job I worked at for an insurance company, we sometimes sent letters out to 1,000 people or 1,500 people at a time. And so what I want to do is I want to create a personalized letter so that each person has their name in the letter, but I want to send this out to 1,000 people. So how do I do that without taking a lot of time to individually go in and create letters for each person? Well, what I do is I have two files. I have this file here, which is the letter itself, and then I have a second file, and that file contains all of the names and addresses of the people that I want to send this letter to. What I then do is I create a mail merge, and what that mail merge does is it goes through and it combines the list of names and addresses with this letter and creates one letter for each person. So that's the idea behind the mail merge. So let's get started with that. Mail merges start by going to the Mailings tab. Hopefully that makes sense. So here on the Mailings tab, what we're going to do is we're going to click on this button that says Start Mail Merge. Now guys, on here you're going to see an option of letters and envelopes, emails and envelopes and labels. While you can do all of these, always, always, always use this step-by-step mail merge wizard. Guys, I've been doing this for probably 12 to 15 years. I know how to create a letter using the letters option, but I still use the step-by-step mail merge wizard. The reason why? It's quicker, it's easier, and it does some of the work for you. If I did the letters option, I'm going to have to manually know what step's next and how to perform that step. And while I do know that, it's much easier and quicker to do the step-by-step mail merge wizard. So again, always, as long as you are working in Word, you're always going to use this mail merge wizard whenever you want to perform a mail merge. Alright, the first thing it asks me, looking over here on the right side of the screen, what type of document are you working on? In other words, am I creating a letter? Am I creating an envelope? Or am I creating a label? Guys, for the purposes of the certification exam, those are the only three things you need to worry about. Don't worry at this point, or ever, as far as my class goes, about email messages or directories. You won't need to do those. But you might be asked to do a letter, or an envelope, or labels. So we're going to start with the most common one, which is the letter. And so here I have a letter, so I am indeed creating a letter. So I'm going to just choose the option that's already chosen for me, if you notice at the bottom, you'll see step 1 of 6. Okay, we've got 6 different steps that you need to go through, which, by the way, is one of your vocabulary terms. So the first step is to select the document type. So I'm going to go to the next step, and the next step says to select the starting document. Well, that just simply means, where am I starting from? Am I starting from a blank file, or am I starting from a pre-typed, all ready to go file? And so most of the time, you're going to use the current document that's open. In other words, do you already have the letter that you're trying to mail merge open? I always do. So the second one is always a choice of use the current document. So step 2, select starting document, use the current document. And I'm ready to go to the next step, select recipients. Select recipients basically means, who am I sending these letters to? In other words, what file contains the list of names and addresses? Well, assuming you have that list already typed, we're going to use an existing list. Alright, so since we already have that list already typed, we are going to browse to go find that list. So I'm going to click the Browse button here. This was one of the files that you copied to your Documents folder, so I'm going to click on Documents. And what I'm looking for now is that W26 try file. Specifically, I'm looking for W26 try B. This is the file that contains the list of names and addresses. So I'm going to click on W26 try B, and I'm going to click Open. So what I'm doing is I'm telling Word that this is the list of files, this is the list of names that I want to send these letters to. So I have my list of names. What I could do here is, if it wanted me to sort this list or filter this list, I could do that. Sorting this list would allow me to put these names in a specific order. Filtering this list would allow me to hide specific names. So for example, just scrolling over here, unfortunately, the names they all come from the same state. But let's say I had a list of names and 3 of them were from Massachusetts and 2 of them were Florida. I could do a filter that says only send letters to the people from Florida. That would be an example of a filter. Now for this particular activity, we don't need to worry about sorting and filtering at all. So I'm going to go ahead and just click OK to accept this list of names. So I have now selected the recipients, the people who are going to receive this letter. I'm ready to go to the next step. I click Next, write your letter. Now I already have my letter typed. So what I need to do is I need to put my cursor where my address for the person I'm sending this to is going to go. So I'm going to put that on the second paragraph below the date. Again, if you don't have your Show Hide turned on, you may need to go to your Home tab to turn that Show Hide on to make sure that you are seeing what you need to do. Alright, so with my cursor here at the second paragraph symbol, I am going to now insert the address for the person who is receiving this letter. Looking on the right hand side, it is giving me the ability to add the address block into my letter. So I'm going to click on address block here. Now I can pick different ways of displaying the name. Alright. Now the default setting, the one that came up by default, Mr. Joshua Randall Jr. This is a sample over here. On the right is the actual data that would be displayed. So what I'm looking at here is I'm picking an option on the left, I'm looking at the right, and I'm saying, does this display my data the way that I want it to be displayed. Does it have the name on the first line, the street address on the second line, and the city, state, and zip on the last line? Assuming that those are all fine, which they should be, we're going to go ahead and click OK, and that will drop in an address block on my letter. So what this is going to do when we run the mail merge is it's going to put the address of the first person here, okay? And now we need to come down here to where it says Dear, okay? When you do your letter, typically it's going to say Dear John or Dear Sally or Dear Frank or something along those lines. And so what I want to do is I want to include the person's name in the Dear line here. So putting my cursor, let me zoom in so that you can see this a little better where my cursor is actually sitting. With my cursor right here in front of the colon, I'm going to go ahead and click on the greeting line. The greeting line. This is the line that's going to say, you know, how am I greeting this person? And Dear Mr. Randall makes sense. Dear Mr. Randall. Notice that in the letter itself, a colon is already there. So over here, I am going to choose no punctuation after the name because the punctuation is already in the letter. If this just said Dear and had no punctuation, then I would either pick the comma if this was a friendly letter, or a colon if this were a business letter. So we're going to leave this as is. Greeting line if there's an invalid recipient name. In other words, if it's going through and it's generating these letters and it finds that, you know, one of the persons doesn't have a last name, what they're going to do is they're going to replace it with Dear Sir or Madam. You don't really need to worry too much about that. I click OK, and that puts my greeting line in here. Alright, now at this point my letter has the standard information of what I want it to say. It's going to thank you for your interest in Sycamore Hill Bed and Breakfast, etc., etc. And so it's got all the information that's pre-typed ready to go. And so we are pretty much ready to move on to the next step. All we've added to my letter at this point is a place for the address to go and for the greeting line to go. We're ready to move on to step number 4, which is to preview our letters to see if it looks the way we want it to look. At this point, I see the first letter that would be generated, and it's going to go to Mr. Larry McGee. And notice down here where it says Dear, Dear. Okay, that is a problem. What I want to do is I want to get rid of the first Dear. If you click on the second Dear, you will notice that this whole line is selected. The reason for this is the greeting that we put in here, going back one step, okay, where it says greeting line, that greeting line is putting the word Dear in the document itself, so we don't need this first Dear. So going back to my preview, I'm going to click in front of that first Dear, and on my keyboard I'm pressing the delete key to delete out that first Dear and the space after it, so that it does simply say Dear Mr. McGee here. Now, there is one thing I do want to change, and that is this address line. So I'm going to select these 3 address lines here. Typically in an address, you don't want this extra space in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my Home tab, and I'm going to choose the no spacing option for those address lines. So basically what I'm doing is I'm telling Word not to put the extra space in between those address lines. Clicking away from my address lines, I now look at my preview and I can say, yes, this does look the way I want it. What I want to do is test it with other. This is only the first letter that's going to be sent. Let's take a look at the second letter that would be sent. Over here on the right, where it says Preview Your Letters, you can click on the double arrow to the right here. So I'm going to click on that. And this shows me the second person and shows me their address and so forth. So I can glance at those first couple lines and make sure that it looks the way I want. Click on the third person. Okay, this particular person does have an apartment, and this is formatted the way it should be. Everything looks fine here. So it looks like we're in pretty good shape here. So we're ready to go to the last step. I said the last step. The last step. We're going to complete the merge. So clicking on this next, complete the merge, we are now on step 6, complete the merge, and we've got two choices. We can either print this directly, which in this case I believe there were 5 different records, so it would print out 5 different letters, or we can choose to edit the individual letters. Now folks, my recommendation, especially when you're doing large mail merges, that you do the edit individual letters. And there's several reasons for that, which I will cover in just a moment. Let's go ahead and click on this edit individual letters. Now this next screen that pops up, merge to new document, that is exactly what we're doing. You are always just going to merge to all records. In other words, what this is doing is it's saying merge this letter with every record that I had chosen back in step, I think it was 3 when I chose my recipients. So I'm sending this letter to all the people that I said I wanted to send it to. I click OK. Now, at first glance, you might say, well, nothing's changed, Mr. Miller. This is the same thing I was just on. Well, it's not. Notice that up here where it says, where the title is, it doesn't say W26 anymore. It says letters 1. And if you scroll down, you will notice a section break, specifically a next page section break at the end of this letter, and then you will see the second letter. Scrolling down more, you'll see the third letter. In fact, if I look down in the bottom left corner of my screen, I will see that I indeed have 5 different letters because I was creating a mail merge to 5 different people. One of the reasons why you want to edit the individual letters is because now, whether I've got 5 people or 5,000 people in this list, I can go through if I wanted to, and I can create a specialized message to any one of these groups of people. So let's go back up to the first letter. So let's say that I am close friends with this Larry McGee. What I can do is I can come down underneath where it says Business Manager. I can press the Enter key a couple times here, and I can type in PS. I look forward to, and it helps if I put the space in there, I look forward to seeing you this weekend. So what I've just done is I've created a personalized message to Larry McGee that the other people won't get. Alright, so that's one reason why I might want to create a mail merge to new document, is so I can personalize the letters. The other reason why I want to do this is when I go to print, File, Print. When I go to print this, I may not want to print everything at once. What I may want to do, especially if I'm printing, say, 2,000 letters, is I may want to just print letters 1 through 100. Okay, guys, don't actually do this, alright, because we're not really printing these out, but I'm just demonstrating what I'm talking about here. If I was going to print 1,000 letters, what I'm probably going to do is break this into groups of maybe 100 at a time. Why? If I'm sharing my printer with other people, which is very common in a business environment, you may have 15 people all printing to the same printer. If I send a print job of 1,000 or 2,000 letters, that means no one else can print until I'm done printing. By breaking it up into smaller groups, printing say 100 at a time, what that's going to do is allow other people to print in between my letters if they need to print something out. So they're not waiting, for 1,000 or 2,000 letters to print out. Alright, if you came into this print dialog box with me, let's go ahead and use this arrow to get back out of it. And so that gives me another reason why I want to print this, why I want to send this to an individual document. Alright, let's wrap up by saving this file. So we're going to do a File, Save As. That wraps up the mail merge as it relates to my letter. I can close this file. That brings me back to the file, the actual W26 Try-A file that I originally created. I do need to save this file. We've made some changes to it, so I need to save this file. And then I can close out of this file, and that will take care of the letter portion of this mail merge. Okay, so now we've got letters printed for all of our customers. I need to now mail those off. And so to do that, I need to do one of two things. Either I need to create envelopes for each one of my customers with their address on it, or I need to create mailing labels that I can stick to the envelopes. Those are my two options. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start by creating a label sheet. So what I have here on the screen is a blank document. If you need to, go ahead and start up Microsoft Word. If you already have Word running but you don't have a blank document, you want to do a File, New, and create your blank document. Whenever you do envelopes or labels, you must start with a blank document. I guarantee you that if you're asked to do this for a practice activity or a quiz or something along those lines, that's the part you're going to forget. So you might want to pause the video, write it down in your notebook, do something to remember that envelopes and labels must start with a blank document. Alright, so here I am with my blank document. I'm going to go to my Labels tab, and we're going to go to Start My Mail Merge. As I've said before, although I could go to Labels, that's not the best option. Always go to Step-by-Step Mail Merge. And here is where I'm going to tell it that I'm starting with a label. So I'm going to tell it that I'm doing labels here. And I'm going to go to the second step. It's asking me to change the document layout. It recognizes that I've got a blank document here and that it's not laid out to handle labels. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this button here that says Label Options. Here I will see a dialog box which allows me to choose from my label options. What I'm going to do is choose the label vendor. Now Mr. Miller will probably have in front a box of labels that you can examine. The most common label vendor is a company called Avery. So we're going to use the Avery US letter. That's the size of the labels. So Avery US letter. And the box itself is going to have a number on it. So all we got to do is match the number on the left here with the number that's on the box of labels. The most common box number is 5160. So I'm going to scroll down here to the labels 5160. Okay, there's my 5160, and that's the most common label type that I've ever used in business. So that's why we've chosen that one. So I'm going to click OK here. And what this does is this changes, and I'm going to zoom out so you can see the page a little better. This changes the layout of my document so that it will fit the labels. Now, if by chance you don't see this on your screen, it could be because your table grid lines are not showing. So on my Layout tab, if my grid lines are off, it's going to look something like this. If my grid lines are on, I'm going to see the actual cells of my table. Alright, I'm ready to go to the next step. So I'm going to click Select Recipients. And this is where, just like before, I get to choose which people I'm going to send these labels to. So I'm going to browse, navigate back to my Documents folder, and I'm looking for that W26 apply file again, 26 apply B, the same file we used before. I open it. Same list of names. Now just a note here, if you sorted this or you filtered it before, you need to sort it and filter it in the exact same way again. This has got 5 letters, not a big deal. But think about this if you were doing 5,000 letters and if the order was different, or you have 4,000 letters but you print out 5,000 names. Now you've got to figure out which ones fit, which ones don't. It's a real mess. So make sure that you sort and you filter using the same settings that you did when you created the letters. I'm going to click OK. And that's all there was to the third step. We've chosen our people that we're sending this to. We've chosen the recipients. So now I'm going to arrange my labels. This is where I can go in, and in the very first label here, I'm going to choose the address block. Just like we did before, we get to pick the way the name is going to be displayed. The preview will appear over here. Want to make sure that the street and the city and the state are all right and that they've got the zip code and all that kind of thing in there. So all that looks right. The preview is correct. So I'm ready to be done with this. I'm going to click OK. Now, do I need a greeting line? Hopefully you answered no to that. The label goes on the envelope, all right, and the label is going to have the person's address, but I'm not going to put Dear John on the outside of the envelope. This is just the address needs to go here. So I'm going to click Next to preview my label. Now that I'm looking at my label, it doesn't quite look the way I want. See how there's spacing in between? Alright, what I want to do is I'm going to select all of those lines, and what I want to do is I want to get rid of that spacing. How do I do that? Well, if I go to my Home tab, I can choose the style called No Spacing. And what that's going to do is make my label have no spacing in between the lines, which is indeed what I want. Now, I do need to back up one step because notice there's only one label printing. There should be 5 labels because there's 5 different people I'm sending this to. So I'm going to back up one step previous because there's a step I missed, and that was this step right here. I want to update all labels. It's an extra step that you do need to take with labels. You don't have to do this for letters, you don't have to do this for envelopes, but you do need to do it for labels. So I'm going to click Update Labels, and what that's going to do is it's going to copy that address block to every single one of these
cells in my paper here. And so rather than me have to copy and paste it 30 different times, I can just use this update all labels, and that does it for me. So now I'm going to click on preview again, and now it's not only showing me the first address, but it's showing me actually all 5 of the addresses for my list of names. I'm ready to move on to the last step, complete the merge. Now, just as I've said before, I always recommend editing the individual labels. Now, in all honesty, if I were really printing these out, I've only got 5 names here. I'd go ahead and just print these. But for purposes of class, so that you can turn this in, and also if you've got a list of 5,000 names for the same reasons I had said before, like breaking up the print job and such, you can click on Edit Individual Labels. You always, always, always choose this All option. We've spoke about that before. And now I've got a document that has the same 5 names in it, but notice the file name at the top says Labels. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this file. This file is going to be called File, Save As. We are going to put this in my computer and in that same dated folder that we've been using. Alright, and this is going to be called W26 Labels. And you do want to put your initials at the end of that, W26 Labels. And I click OK or Save. There's my label file. I'm going to go ahead and close this. Now technically this document file, the one that we use to create the labels, under certain circumstances I might save it, other times I won't. This is such a quick file to create, it's not that big a deal. I don't necessarily save it all the time. Let's go ahead and close this without saving this particular file. So I'm going to say close. Do you want to save changes to document 2, or yours might say document 1 or document 5? That's going to be a don't save. For this last thing we're going to do in this video, we need to open another blank document. And the last thing I want to talk about is creating the list of names. Creating the list of names. So again, we're going to start with a blank file, and we're going to go to Mailings. If you click on this Select Recipients option, Select Recipients, this is the one time I'm not going to start the mail merge. I want to go straight to Recipients because my goal is I want to create my list of names. See here where it says Type a New List. I click on that, and now it opens up a dialog box with which I can now type in my names. So I'm going to type in my name in here, so go ahead and follow me and type my name in as well. So the title is going to be Mr. First name Scott, last name Miller. There is no line 2, so we can skip that. City is Riviera Beach. Tabbing again. State, FL, capital F, capital L. And the last thing that we need to type in here is the zip code, 33404. Now, I would like you to create a new entry, so click on New Entry. And for this second line, you're going to type in your information. So your title will either be Mr. or Ms., and then your first and last name. And if you don't know your address, you can use the school's address as well. Company name you can leave blank, so go ahead and fill that in with your information. You may want to pause the video as that's processing. Hopefully now you have your data entered in for the second record here. Pretty much we're done here. We're going to click OK. And what this is going to do is ask us to save this file. Well, we want to redirect this again to Documents and put this in the same dated folder that we've been using. The file name that we're going to use for this is going to be W26 names. W26 names, N-A-M-E-S, with your initials. Click Save, and that will save that particular file. Now you might say, but Mr. Miller, I don't see anything. If you close this file, don't worry about saving it, and you go to that folder, you will see that this file is in a different format. It is in a Microsoft Access format, and it doesn't have the same layout. Most of you won't be able to open this file on your computers because you don't have Access installed. A few computers on campus do have Access, but most of them do not. Alright, but you can still upload that file to NGrade at the end of today's lesson. Today we talked a little bit about the mail merge process, being able to take a list of names and sending letters to those people. We did actually create a mail merge for a letter, and we showed you at the end of that mail merge how to merge to a new document and the reason for that. We then created a mail merge of labels so that we can attach labels to our envelopes that we would send out, and then we showed you how to actually create the address list if you wanted to actually make your own list of names that you could send this out to.